Okay, I think we'll start now, and further attendees will join us shortly, I'm sure. So hello and welcome to this webinar about phase 2 of the COVID-19 Audience Outlook Monitor. Today we'll be exploring the latest results with Jade Lilly, Head of Sector Development at the Australia Council, and Tandi Palmer Williams, Managing Director of Patternmakers, the agency that has delivered this research tool. I'm Chris Pope, Research Programme Manager at the Australia Council, and a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us this afternoon. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land from which I'm coming to you today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd also like to acknowledge the many nations throughout Australia that we're gathering from and pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and to all First Nations peoples present and online in this session. We know from the first phase of the Audience Outlook Monitor that the majority of audiences were planning to return to arts and culture events in the future. But there were differences in when they would return, in the types and size of events people felt comfortable attending, and a range of views on safety measures. In the digital space, 3/4 of audience members were engaging online, and many had discovered new artists and works. So how have things changed since the first phase in May? Have audiences started to return? How have comfort levels shifted, and what's happened to online engagement? We'll explore these questions and more in today's session. Since the first phase, restrictions around the country eased and many cultural institutions and venues reopened, but there are very different pictures across each state and territory. The recent surge in COVID cases in Victoria and in New South Wales has shown how quickly things can change. So this research is still providing vital information for artists and cultural organisations as they reassess, adapt and make those critical decisions to plan for the future. So I'll hand over to Jade now to kick off today's discussion. Before I do, a quick note on registering questions. A few of you attendees will be familiar with this process, but feel free to start sending questions through. But if you could please use the Q&A button to do that. The chat function is also there for you to use for general discussion, and we encourage you to do so, but we'll be taking questions from the Q&A section. Thanks very much, and now it's over to Jade.
Thanks so much, Chris, and hello everyone. It's nice to be here with you. I'm joining from Dja country in regional Victoria, and I'd like to also acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners, to elders past, present and future, and pay my respects also to all of the First Nations people who are joining us on the call today. Before we hear from Tandi, it's important to acknowledge that, as Chris suggested, we are living in a time of absolute multiplicity. Each state, each territory, each region, each town, each community are impacted by this experience, but also experiencing it very differently. So I guess before we jump into the data and the findings, just want to acknowledge that it's really tough for some of our colleagues and friends in particular parts of the country at the moment. And for those who are having the opportunity to open back up and be spending time with loved ones and family and friends, we're watching closely and looking to your experiences to guide us as we open up in a different, I guess, rhythm in all of the places that we live and work. That there is a poll actually that we were going to ask you to participate in, please, and that tells us a little bit about how you're currently engaging and also where you are based and where you're calling in from. I think it should pop up on the screen. There it is. So if you wouldn't mind participating, that helps us to just get a sense of the scope and places that people are joining us from, and we'll share those results as soon as they're in. Thank you. Tandi, it's great to be here with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know that we're going to share the findings in a couple of segments, one being around in-person engagement and one being around online. So I'll hand over to you to share the first suite of findings with us, please.
Sure, thanks Jade. And hello everyone, it's a pleasure to be with you again today to talk about the results of the second phase of the Audience Outlook Monitor, which occurred earlier this month. And it came at kind of a key time when across the country, since May, when our first data collection occurred, we had a decline in rates of transmission of the virus. I think across all states and territories we were looking at reopening, and then in June we had cases start to climb again, particularly in Victoria, a couple of cases in the ACT and New South Wales. So it's been a really interesting time to capture data again. I'm looking forward to sharing some of those findings with you today. Before we get going, just wanted to say thank you again to the Australia Council for the opportunity to connect with you. I'd like to thank our Auslan interpreters who are going to be working hard today. Thank you so much. And to Jade, my co-presenter, thank you for asking some good questions. Thank you in advance, and helping to facilitate the discussion today and put these results in the context of what we're working through as a sector, and all of the different, I guess, lines of inquiry that you're pursuing as well at the moment in your role. So I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners. I'm coming to you, beaming out to you from Guringai country in New South Wales. And I'm sure those of you in New South Wales who are out there can also empathise with the situation of feeling like we're kind of in limbo a little bit. Are we going into lockdown here in this state, or are we going to be seeing restrictions lift again in the coming months? No one knows. We'll wait and see. But I'd like to just maybe show the results of those polls now, if we can. I think the first one was about whether you're open physically or distributing online, and we can see now on screen that 7% are physically open, 63% are distributing, they work digitally at this time, 28% both. So at this stage it looks like the group of us who have come together today are still mostly online, or at least partially online. And if we can show the next one, that'd be great as well. So looks like we're seeing the largest number of respondents from New South Wales, 41%, then Victoria, 32%, Queensland, 14%, and smaller numbers from elsewhere around the country. So welcome everyone. Thank you again for joining us and for sharing your situation on the poll. The chat is there for you, so please feel free to introduce yourself, the country that you're on, and use that chat as we go through to share your experiences. If you have something to offer the discussion, we'd love to hear about it. Don't hold back. We need to come together and be all sharing our knowledge and ideas at this time, so please don't hesitate. We're going to start by talking about audience attitudes towards attending in person, and I'm going to show my slides in a second. So basically the data that we're going to be talking about today is from data collected in early July. So we had over 150 participating organisations around Australia participate again, and they're surveying a different segment of the same database that they used in phase 1. And so we've had over 15,000 respondents contribute their experiences to phase 2, and a really good size in all states and territories, so we can get a really good picture of how things are looking around the country. So basically what we're seeing in the results, I'm going to kind of get straight into it, is that nationally, and we'll talk about national averages in a moment, but around the country, most indicators, when we look at Australian respondents, most indicators of demand are moving in a positive direction when we look at averages. So since between May and July, the proportion that say they're ready to attend as soon as permitted has increased from 22% to 28%. At different types of venues, we're seeing an increased proportion of audiences say they'd feel comfortable to visit today, assuming those venues were following recommended safety procedures, and we know they look a little bit different in each state, particularly around social distancing. But you know, now 9 in 10 audience members are comfortable, at least somewhat comfortable, to attend museums and galleries, and we're now seeing a majority that say they feel at least somewhat comfortable in a 100-seat venue, assuming they were following social distancing guidelines. Both of those have jumped up. 24% of people, and remember our sample is people who are attendees of cultural institutions and arts organisations. So they're in the sample because they have attended in the past 2 years or so. So a quarter of those had attended in person in the 2 weeks before data collection. So we're looking at very late June and the first part of July. So 42%, so a bit around double that, are actually making firm plans to attend an event in person, and that's obviously jumped up a lot since the last data collection in May, when things were quite sort of suppressed. And 1 in 10 have bought tickets to a show recently. So across the country, those indicators are moving in a positive direction. Having said that, this phase is a little bit different to the last phase because we are seeing bigger differences from state to state. So when we look at national averages, we really need to be clear that an average is kind of in the middle of quite a big range, and that diversity around the country is increasing. So I've just popped up on screen a bit of a map that shows in black the proportion that of audiences that say that they're ready to attend as soon as permitted. Last time in May, it was the highest in the Northern Territory, and it continues to be very high there. But we've seen the biggest changes in states like Tasmania, West Australia, South Australia, Queensland, where there've been, as far as I know, no or low cases of community transmission, and really increasing confidence there among audiences to get out and start attending again. So the results are the highest in terms of readiness to attend in Northern Territory and West Australia right now, closely followed by Queensland, Tasmania, South Australia. So where things get a little bit different is in terms of New South Wales, Victoria, ACT. So people are most cautious at the moment in Victoria. Won't surprise you to hear that. The ACT as well, I think there was a couple of cases right around the time of data collection, and the same in New South Wales. So cases have grown in New South Wales since the time of data collection. So we'd be looking at those results and interpreting them with caution. They could go more towards the Victorian sentiment in the next little while, or the other way. We'll wait and see. So yeah, basically in Victoria and the ACT, the picture hasn't changed a lot since May. We're dealing with a situation where, you know, in roughly similar proportions, people feel, you know, cautious about re-attending, and some people, even in those states that are relatively open right now, where we've got higher levels of readiness to attend, we still see that some people prefer to stay at home, even though the risk is very, very small right now. Basically, there's people that do feel vulnerable and prefer to stay at home, even though the risk of transmission is very, very small. So the states, it's interesting to observe that readiness to attend is highest, I think, in the states where there's also greatest levels of confidence in border controls. So Northern Territory and WA, Tasmania, for instance, slightly less chances of transmission potentially occurring through interstate travel or returning travellers. So basically the picture around the country for most states is that it's increasingly positive. There's more confidence about attending, but there are some areas that are a bit concerning. And in this, in this group today, I think we should address those. So I'm going to share some of the results that aren't as positive with you at the moment, but obviously we need to kind of keep those in context. So one of the things we learnt in this latest phase of data collection is that there's a proportion of people out there who, when they do come back to events, they expect to spend less than they did before. And some of you will know that coming into this latest round of data collection, we wanted to probe a little bit more deeply into people's financial circumstances and outlook. And we know from phase one that over a third of our audience have themselves experienced a loss of household income as a result of the pandemic. This time we've asked a number of different new questions, including questions about what people who have actually spent on tickets and in-person events. And we've also asked when they return, do they expect to spend the same or less than before? And so we know that between 16 and 18% of people nationally expect to attend less when they return to arts and cultural events. And what's interesting, as you'll see on screen, is that this result is fairly consistent from state to state, whereas readiness to attend is quite different. It's almost double in the Northern Territory what it is in Victoria at the moment. So to see a result that is this stable around the country leads us to believe that this isn't necessarily related to the course of the virus, but more so relates to people's financial outlook, their economic outlook right now. And when we compare people who have been financially impacted already to people who haven't, yes, having a loss of household income does affect how people will spend, but we know that this result is held true even if people haven't been financially affected themselves at this time. And so we believe that this relates more to people's personal values around finances and how conservative they are with spending. So that's just to mention that. Another area of concern in the survey is around attendance long term. So we asked people, how will your attendance at arts and cultural activities be affected by the pandemic in the long term, given your circumstances? And the proportion that say they expect to attend less than they did before has actually increased. So between May and July, we've seen that proportion increase from the high teens to now 22% expect to attend less than they did before. And what we think's going on is that in that 2 months, people have had a little bit more time to learn about the pandemic and all its implications. And I think there's been a deepening understanding that the pandemic could hang around for quite some time, so that people's attendance, whereas before they might have thought that long term they'd be back attending as they were in the past, now we've got around a fifth to a quarter of people saying that long term they think their attendance in person is going to be affected. So I think that's kind of only natural given what we're all realising and what we're going through. There is some change from state to state, so you'll notice that Northern Territory, Queensland, WA are a bit more optimistic long term, and ACT, South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales a little bit more pessimistic. So there is here a relationship to the rates of transmission of the virus, although again it doesn't match the transmission rates in each state. So there's things going on around our economic outlook, our attitudinal outlook that don't necessarily relate to what's happening in our state with the virus right now. So another thing that we've noticed in relation to this latest round of data collection is that lead times for buying tickets are getting a little bit shorter. So most people are now purchasing tickets for events less than 1 month out. And I'd love to know if you are working at a ticketed with ticketed events or an organisation that's got things on sale at the moment. I'd love to know what you've observed in your ticket sales trends. But in May, what we saw is that most of the people who had bought a ticket recently were doing so for 8 months in advance. So that time, I think it was January 2021 onwards, in the dark green, which you can see up top. By July, this trend has flipped, where most people are buying tickets for, the next month, or, in the near future rather than in the long term. And so people are waiting to see what happens, I guess, that sort of feeling of wait and see before they buy a ticket, and particularly for those higher value spend items. And for those who've joined us on some of the webinars around phase 1, that caution is not only about, will they themselves be sick and need to miss the event, or will the event be cancelled, or will I be able to travel to the event at that time, or might something else be going on that could put that event at risk. So when we look at the different types of events, and we were curious about the different potential types of venues that might be considered in terms of programming. So what we've done in this latest round of data collection is test 4 different options for an event. A live streamed digital program, an outdoor venue with lawn space so you can spread out, an indoor venue with fixed seating where social distancing is applied, or an indoor venue with loose seating so people can arrange themselves as they feel comfortable. And what you can see on screen now is some charts showing in the red the top choice, in the pink second choice, yellow third choice, blue the least preferred option. So you'll see some interesting patterns. This is the national average. So we've got around 40% of people who say their first preference is a digital program right now, followed by an outdoor venue with lawn seating. When you look at the first and second choice together, you'll see that the outdoor event has the highest levels of popularity, whereas an indoor venue has the lowest. And when we compare fixed seating versus loose seating for an indoor venue, most people prefer fixed seating. So I'll just show you now how this changes around the country, because we have heard different things in different states and territories. So now on screen you can see people's first preference. So in Victoria, ACT and New South Wales, the biggest proportion say they prefer a digital program right now. Even in Tasmania, we've got a big group saying they prefer digital. Outdoor venues are more popular where community transmission is lower. So Queensland, South Australia, WA. And we think that there's a weather factor in there as well. Once in Northern Territory, by far, the preferred choice is an outdoor venue. But you can see that from state to state, it is quite different. So with all the results, we really encourage you to look at the state and territory snapshots, which are going to be coming out through some of the state agencies in the next few days and weeks, and also use the dashboard to explore the results for your region, so you know what's going on in your state or territory. And yeah, just bear in mind where we're looking at national averages, to think that, that could be blending some quite different experiences across different states. So one of the things we asked about in-person attendance, and shortly I'll ask Jade for her reflections on these results before we start talking about online participation. But one of the other things we did is ask for those people who had recently attended an event in person. We asked them, that we said to them, venues are going to taking steps to make you safe and comfortable in their venues. Can you tell us, based on your experience, what has worked well and what could be improved? And I'm going to show you now some of the comments that we've heard from people. So this was a qualitative question design, and most people, when we look at the kind of themes that are coming through in their answers, we can see that Mostly people had positive feedback to share. They're generally satisfied with the way that safety measures are being applied and social distancing is being applied, and could recount all of the different ways that they could see it being applied at the event that they were going to. In terms of what could be improved, there's obviously some people had observed places where there could have been hand sanitizer, or that there's room for improvement in certain venues for some safety measures. But generally the theme was mainly around communication, actually. So helping them understand before they attended what to expect, and to help manage things in the venue with staff that are present on the day. But I'm going to read you some of the comments. So one person from New South Wales said, for instance, that the trip on the ferry to Cockatoo Island had enough room to make me feel safe. The openness of the venues helped to make me feel safe. The closed rooms were limited to the appropriate number of people, and this was controlled by volunteers. The open air cafe and restaurant had sanitizers and felt safe. So what we're observing is that people, where they can see multiple different safety measures being applied visibly, that leads to overall feelings of safety. One person from New South Wales has said, in relation to the types of venues that they prefer right now, if possible, I prefer live performance to streamed programming. At the present time, outdoor events are great, but it depends on strict supervision of distancing. If seated with movable seating, it might be difficult to constrain attendees to observe distancing guidelines. Booked, fixed seating with strict guidelines and supervision is preferable. And this comment I've chosen to include it today because it seems to kind of summarise how a lot of people feel about the different types of venues and the different potential ways that events might run. So although lots of people prefer outdoor events and feel that they would be well ventilated, that people would have agency to move around, that kind of thing, they do still want venues to be in control of how audiences are seated and how they interact in the flow of visitors, and don't want to be caught out stuck in a crowd or feeling like uncomfortable because of the way that other audience members are behaving. So 2 comments here from 2 different people. One has said, I just don't want to be close to people I don't know, especially for a lengthy time. Outdoors is better than indoors. And another one said, I'd feel safest with the digital option, but I'd be just as comfortable and probably happier getting outside for an event at the moment. So I popped these comments on because they're both from Queensland respondents, where generally people do feel quite relaxed and safe right now. However, safety still is a concern for some people, even in the states where there's low community transmission right now. And we know that in those states, there are still people, around 1 in 10, who just won't consider going out right now. So even the states with low community transmission still need to take venue safety and social distancing guidelines really seriously if they want to welcome back the broadest possible audience to their events. So couple more comments. Oh, this is one comment from one person. I would only participate in an event online from home. People have proven that they can and will behave badly. 1 cough, 1 sneeze, 1 breath, 1 touch is all it takes. Organisers cannot guarantee my safety in an in-person situation. I've participated in several events online via live streaming and Zoom. Very much appreciate the efforts of the organisers in continuing to make event available in this manner. So safety measures make a difference for some people. For others, they perceive a level of risk that just isn't tolerable and will prefer to stay at home. So we're still seeing very strong levels of interest in online streaming right now. 2 more comments. There were no clear directions on where people could sit. Another group sat in our row, which I was uncomfortable with. And another person said they could have had more staff on to facilitate all of the explanations to attendees, i.e. it took a while to actually take our seats. So what we think is based on the comments that we've heard, all different safety measures are important in reassuring visitors that their safety is important and that the venue is in control of the situation and doing everything they need to do to reassure people. So that includes sanitizer, signage, social distancing, and we think that staff are really important. So front of house or gallery attendants, in bridging the gap where maybe something hasn't been visible to an attendee, and so having potentially even extra staff members are involved will make a difference in some places. So Jade, I'd love to hear your reflections now on in-person attendance, what you think jumps out to you about what we're seeing in this data, and any questions you've got about in-person attendance, and then we can talk a little bit about online.
Tandi, I'm just so grateful that this work has actually happened. So we have some measures and some thinking to do. I think my immediate responses are how we're able to kind of go local in such a distinct way at the moment, and that our local environments are really informing the way that we're able to engage with work, with artists, with audiences alike. I have a couple of questions, but what I might do is actually just pop into the questions that have come from participants and see if we can have a go at answering a couple of those, and then I'll certainly add one of mine. We've got a question from Bridget. Is it possible people expect to spend less because they expect to attend less, which might mean that they are still prepared to pay higher ticket prices to those events they still attend? You have a view on that, Tandi?
Do you mind just repeating that question? Sorry, I think I got the first part, not the second part. Yeah.
Sure. Is it possible people expect to spend less because they expect to attend less, which might mean they are still prepared to pay higher ticket prices to those events they still attend?
Yes, I think so. So yes, definitely people's expectations around spending are partially related to attendance, and what they expect to be on sale and available, and what they themselves expect to spend. People their values haven't changed overnight. So what we're seeing is that, partially their desire to experience arts and culture and to support arts and cultural practitioners and the creation of art has partially gone online. So people, one of the real strong motivations for participating online is to obviously experience that work, but also to support arts and cultural producers to keep making. So yes, people, many people expect to spend the same or more than before. The majority do. I only pick up on the proportion that expect to attend less, because I think we should talk about it. But certainly I think the majority plan to spend the same or more. And when we look at how much more or how much less people plan to spend, it more or less evens out. So there are the people who expect to spend more expect to spend a little bit more. The people that expect to attend less, sometimes say, maybe 50% less or something. But once you kind of net that out, we expect to see, somewhere between 90 and 100% of the market is still there. So certainly there is still the possibility to, charge high prices for premium events, and that people may be willing, if they're attending slightly less things, they may be willing to spend more on some really particular opportunities. So I think any kind of creative thinking or strategizing you can do in that area would be well worth, pursuing.
Yeah, great, thank you. There's another question about whether or not the survey results draw any useful insights from variation across age groups.
So what I might do is just jump on and show you now the dashboard, because there's a couple of things I'd like to just point out. So let me see if you're going to see this. How do I do that? Sorry. All right, So some of you will be familiar with this already, others may be seeing it for the first time, but you can access this dashboard from our website. My colleague Bianca can put a link in the chat for you if you're not sure where to access it, and you do need to log in using some details, some generic details. It's freely accessible to everyone. So what we can do is jump into the key indicators, and up the top here we've got the reports that are available in the dashboard, and key indicators pulls out a few of the kind of key questions from different parts of the survey. And one of the things that we need to do is set, oh sorry, I'm going to have to change this one because we're not seeing, so sorry, demand for live events. What we can see now in programs is all of the different states and territories, and if you click on any location, what you'll be able to do is click on and off phase 1 and phase 2 results. So at the moment, with everything clicked on, you'll see all of the different states and territories and the national results for phase 1 and phase 2. And if you've got the report mode with by survey, you'll see each of those presented as a separate column chart. So I think the question was around, Jay, do you mind just repeating the question about age?
Any useful insights from variation across age groups?
Okay, great. So I'll just show the national results for each phase. And then what I'm going to do is apply a filter. So there's loads of different filters you can play around with about the organisation that the respondent has attended in the past, the respondents, you know, attitudinal outlook, their past behaviour, their demographics. So what I'll choose is age cohort here and apply that. And we'll just wait for it to load. One of the subtleties in the dashboard that I will also mention at this point is that there's 2 ways to navigate the state results. One is by clicking on and off the states in the program section, and that's actually the state of the organisation that is participating in the study. Whereas if you go to the filter and apply state or territory of respondent, that's where you'll see the location of the person responding to the survey. And from some states and territories, there's, you know, that's basically the same. Where it's slightly different is, for instance, organisations in the ACT draw on audiences from New South Wales and Victoria quite heavily. So if you're in the ACT, you might want to just think about, are you interested in people who reside in your state, or do you want to see audiences that have visited your organisations in your state, and have a think about which is preferable. So here you can see the results by age, and this is in the past fortnight. Did you do any of the following activities in person? This one's about, did you make firm plans? So as you can see in phase 1, there is an age pattern to an extent, although it's not the strongest indicator of how people feel. So for instance, one of the things, I might just flip to show you some of the other indicators. So this is which statement represents how you feel about going out to cultural events, and the 3 options is cannot foresee going out until there's no risk, when reasonably confident that the risk of transmission is minimal, and as soon as it's permitted. So you can see that age does affect the proportion that cannot foresee going out until there's no risk to them. But across all age groups, there is a segment that feel very confident. And so, you know, in relatively similar proportions in all age groups shown, you know, a relatively similar proportion are ready to attend as soon as permitted. So what we see is that age is partly a factor at play in some areas and elsewhere not. What we've noticed is that obviously with increasing age, there's more and more likelihood that someone's going to have a serious health vulnerability or have a partner that does, which makes them a little bit more cautious in terms of health reasons. Having said that, I'm sure I certainly know plenty of older people who are very confident to go out right now and believe that they're invincible, or maybe just that they don't want to change how they behave right now. So there's lots of, social commentary we could make about that, but just to say that age is definitely an interesting thing to have an explore of in the data, particularly with the online results as well. So please do get in there and have a look.
Thank you. There's some awesome questions in the Q&A section, and I know we've only got about 20 minutes left. So I'm wondering if we jump into the online engagement component of the data, and then we try and wrap as many questions as we can in the last 10 minutes.
Let's do that. So I've just got one slide to share with online, so hopefully we can plow through it. But basically with online, what we're seeing is that the results are pretty stable or increasingly kind of positive in some areas. I was expecting that we'd see a bit of a drop off from May to July in terms of online participation, as kind of the novelty factor maybe wears off and people start reattending. But it hasn't really held up. So basically, in terms of the proportion of audiences that are participating online, it's now 73%. It was 75% in May. So we've seen a decline of 2%, but anything differences of 1 or 2%, we basically call stable, because there's, that could be down to small variances in, the sample size and stuff like that. So we don't put too much weight on an increase or a decrease of 2%. So we call that relatively stable. The proportion of online audiences that say they're engaging more frequently has jumped. That's a lot higher now. So for those people who are online, we think that the increasing availability of high quality content and more stuff is coming out, which is leading people to potentially spend longer on the things that they do enjoy. We have seen, in terms of the different types of online arts experiences, there has been a slight drop in, for instance, the proportion who are participating in online tours and virtual exhibitions, which we think is slightly related to the fact that museums have been one of the first types of venues to reopen, and some people are starting to attend in person again. So there is a relationship between online participation and offline participation, but as you'll see in the bottom right of this slide, 78% of those who have returned recently to a live event, this statistic is about the number who've gone to a live performance specifically, they also participated online. So many people who are reattending are still online participating, and we expect that will continue. So almost 3/4 of those who are participating more frequently say they plan to continue, which is also increasing. In terms of what people are paying for, again, the results are stable. We're seeing very small 2% increases in the proportion who are paying for online experiences, and the proportion that are paying more than $50. And we've also, for the first time this phase, captured people who are spending more than $100. So if you're in, the space of looking at products and how they're selling online, you might want to dig into that data and understand the types of groups and demographics that are paying more than $100 if building up your revenue from online products is one of your goals. So in terms of online, I think the online audience doesn't appear to be going anywhere. Even in states that are, reopening and feeling much more confident about attending in person, we're still seeing very high rates of online participation, though there is a relationship with physical participation. So as people start reattending, we are likely to see a small drop off in the number of people are engaging and potentially paying for things. So as people have the opportunity to attend in person and pay for live experiences, we may see that drop off. But I'll just flip to my takeaways now and go to number 5 first, which is definitely continuing to plan for long-term, for digital distribution long-term is really important. So my other takeaways before we go to some questions, just to sum up, yes, confidence is returning and demand is strongest in the locations where the virus has been kind of successfully suppressed or eliminated, but some choose to remain at home, and many still care about venue safety. So sentiment does change rapidly. So we've seen that even in a matter of a few weeks of things changing in Victoria and other states, things look different in terms of the results. So we need to be following trends in each region and potentially following the experience of other states to help us plan for different scenarios. So given what we're seeing in terms of how an outbreak can occur from just one person in a state, that we do need to plan for scenarios where we might see further outbreaks and vice versa. Safety is king, obviously. Signage, sanitizer, social distancing and staff all reinforce that feeling of safety, and communication is really key. So attendees want to know at every stage of the audience journey about venue safety and what they can do to help make others feel safe, and the rationale for different things, all that kind of thing. So hopefully now we can tackle some more of those questions. Jade, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, Tandi, thank you so much. We've got one from Nita. Hi, Nita, up in England. You've just asked, did you gain any insight into the value of hybrid delivery of works, where the audience engages with arts or cultural experiences from home and in person simultaneously? Just if you have any recommendations for organisations or artists investigating a hybrid approach.
Where you've got a live or a physical audience and a digital audience at the same time. Look, not something we've specifically probed. I'll keep an eye out for that as we continue to go through the qualitative data. Is there something in particular you're curious about, Nita?
Maybe Nita can come back to us if that's the case.
Yeah.
Interesting question.
Yeah.
And just a question as to, are people still positive about timed ticketing? Was there any feedback about free institutions that haven't implemented ticketing yet?
Yeah, so for those who have experienced venues with time ticketing, almost overwhelmingly it was something that they think worked well. And it's something that some people, to be honest, prefer. So we have heard from some people that their experience in venues, in their opinion, has actually been better because the number of visitors has been kept low. And so we think that, yes, it's a good idea. It's working, particularly for people who might have different needs or access requirements. That's a good idea. So I don't think there's anything negative I can say about time ticketing at this point. I haven't heard anything.
It makes me think about a conversation with Carolyn Bowditch, the CEO of Arts Access Victoria, as part of the industry roundtables recently, and reminding people that the world's actually never been so accessible as it is now for people with disability and diverse needs in this sense. So I've been thinking a lot about what that means, and is it about time ticketing? Is it about physical space? Is it about a kind of democratized experience of access and people having more of a similar experience in terms of ways to engage online? I'm not sure if you've got any reflections on that, but it's something I would put to the group to say we now know what that means, and it's something that we should never forget.
Yeah, I mean, I was really heartened to hear that, and I can certainly see that accessibility in some ways has improved for all those reasons, and the fact that we can now experience so much from home means not just for people who experience disability, but also for people who are in caring roles or have young children at home, or who live in, a remote area. The access that we now have to an enormous amount of content is extraordinary. I have been, to be honest, worried that the opposite is true for physical attendance, because people with a disability are more likely to feel vulnerable in terms of the virus, more likely to say that they don't feel comfortable to attend in person. And that providing digital access is, possible for well-resourced institutions, but, less so for all types of, all spaces and all practitioners. So I think, I'm glad to hear that, that people are experiencing as a kind of a good time for accessibility. I think there's also the risk of, as states that do reopen, that the people that aren't welcomed back in person that we're disproportionately seeing people with a disability stay home. So I think, it's probably somewhere in the middle, a bit of both. But certainly I think that digital distribution is going to be part of an access kind of statement in future, and we need to be thinking about digital as providing access to parts of the community that can't attend in person right now.
Great, thank you. There's just a question about if you would identify any challenges or limitations with the methods of the study chosen or the process in general.
Oh, lots. So obviously, obviously some of the limitations that we need to be aware of are the fact that, this is a study of past attendees who appear in email databases. And so we potentially not hearing from people who don't appear in those databases. So it's not a general population survey. There's people out there who we won't have heard from. It's also a purely online survey method. So we know that certain groups don't have equal access to participate in digital surveys. They aren't always accessible to everyone for reasons of, that they have access requirements or might speak a different language. So there's all sorts of limitations in terms of that as well. We did use an incentive, and that's designed to hear from people who are kind of less engaged with arts and cultural organisations, but we're likely to be hearing from people who are more engaged with our sector than not. So there's some of the limitations. I'm not sure, there's probably others that I failed to mention, but as with any research, understanding the method that's been used is really important, and interpreting it with cautiously is really important. I think always looking at the sample size. So in some of the breakdowns in the dashboard, we can get down to quite small sample sizes. For instance, if you're filtering by regional Australia and a state or some demographic group. So below each chart, you should see an N, and that will give you the number of respondents that are in that category. So just keep an eye out where you are applying filters. If that gets down below, 400 or 300, then we need to be really cautious about relying on that and just be thinking about who we're not hearing from. So particularly in some of the smaller states, population-wise, we're drawing on a smaller pool of organisations. And to be able to set this study up in a robust way that's going to be able to be replicated each phase, we had to set some limits in terms of the minimum database size and stuff like that. So you can explore the results by organisation size and look at, for instance, the experience of audiences for micro, very small organisations. But we do have less of those in our pool of participating organisations. So again, we just need to bear in mind who we might not be hearing from. Having said that, the results for different organisation sizes don't vary that much, and across the country, some of the differences I pointed out today are the ones to keep an eye out for. So one of them that we haven't talked about is frequency of attendance. So the results really do change when we look at people who attend frequently versus infrequently, and obviously from state to state now we're seeing quite big differences as well.
That's great, thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left, and I wondered if I did ask you this question yesterday. I hope you're happy to share it, but what are the top 3 takeaways that you would really want to leave the sector with from today and from this latest trench of data?
I think probably, the 5 takeaways that I've just shared on my last slide are probably the key things to bear in mind as we go ahead. Obviously, we've set this up to be a bi-monthly data collection, so we'll be collecting data again in early September. So as things change, just as I mentioned on that last slide, we are seeing quite rapid changes. So obviously following the rates of community transmission, the restrictions and any issues around border controls are obviously those upstream variables that are going to affect results, but certainly things like planning for digital and stuff, we're seeing that hold true, you know, across different regions. So there are things that are more stable than others, but just keep an eye out for things that are changing in your region, and look at the experience of others and be in close communication with your colleagues in other areas to understand their situation, how we can work together really across our sector nationally to welcome back the broadest possible audience, and have that equity of access again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tandi. I'm going to hand back over to Chris to just close off the session for us today. I know that we didn't get quite through all of the questions, but I would hope that we can take these away with us and see if we're able to come back to you with some responses. Really appreciate everyone joining us, and just take care, and yeah, we're thinking of you out there.
Yes, thank you, Jade, and thanks very much, Tandi, again for taking us through the phase 2 results. Fascinating findings and lots to consider. I just want to say that there's still a few questions in the Q&A, so sorry we couldn't get to all of those in the time we had today. So we might just put our email addresses and website up on screen now. So please feel free to send further questions or comments through to us. It'd be good to discuss those. You can find further information on phase 2 on both the Patternmakers site and the Australia Council website. And there is actually another Australia Council website about to Australia Council webinar about to happen now, which is Creative Connections, demonstrating your value and impact in an evolving world. With that's part of the Creative Connections series, and it's with Jackie Bailey and from BYP Group. So that information will be available on our website if you wanted to jump onto that one for another webinar this afternoon. We'll be back with further updates on phase 3, the final phase, which will be conducted in September, as Tandi said there. So please keep an eye on the websites and social feeds for further info on that. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and goodbye for now.